Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We are go for 3 in 23. Saturday, getting a chance to see Georgia own the East for the final time. What a day it was, and what a time to come in here on Monday and look back on all of that. We're going to reflect on it. Really one of the most special moments I've ever experienced in Sanford Stadium, and it seems like it sort of hit other people in kind of the same way. We'll cover all of that here over the course of the next little bit. Obviously, one of the big storylines to discuss from the game, the return of Brock Bowers. He deserves all the credit in the world for just being built different than almost any player you've ever seen in your entire life. Certainly for me, I would say that's true. We'll cover that. John Stinchcomb joins us here today. We'll also get ready for Dog Nation Invasion coming up on Saturday. I just can't believe all the really fun stuff we get a chance to talk about. We are just so lucky to be doing this at this time. I hope you feel the same way that I do. Going to be a really, really fun one. So what do you say? Without further ado, we get it all started. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I think if I live a very long time and hopefully get a chance to see very many more memorable Georgia seasons, I don't know, though, there'll be too many nights that just sort of hit me the way that Saturday did for Georgia in beating Ole Miss. Obviously a great time to beat a top 10 team, 52-17. From a football standpoint, this couldn't have worked out any better for UGA, of course. We're obviously a football show. But the sense that I get is that for so many people, they felt very close to the way that I did, that there were feelings involved here that are just so much more about than just the actual football itself and the go for 3 in 23 and the own the East and all the things that obviously Georgia was trying to tangibly accomplish on Saturday. So much of what happened during that game seemed to be so much bigger than that. I was definitely feeling that way, but the thing that you got to understand about me is I'm a little bit probably excessively sentimental sometimes, and I get weirdly sentimental near the end of football seasons because I do love college football. I love going to, Georgia football games. Been going since I was a little kid. Got a chance to take my, sort of still for now little kid son on Saturday. My daughter didn't go, my son did. My wife went. And, doing that for the last time between the hedges in this particular season, that always brings up a certain level of sentimentality with me. That's just kind of the way that it goes. Senior night brings that out in me. Every year when it comes to seniors, this year I say especially more so, we're kind of in a day and age in which the Georgia senior class every year seems to be really, really special. That's kind of bringing some of that sentimental emotion out. I was sitting next to my friend, Kaylee Manziel, and when Brock Bowers scored his touchdown, first of all, as someone who sits in the press box every single game, big Georgia fan, normally I don't have too much of an issue with the idea that you can be a fan, but when you're in the press box, you have to be like the rest of the coastal elites, buttoned up and professional. You can't cheer. I've never had more of a problem with that. Like, I almost just jumped out of my chair when Brock Bowers scored that touchdown on Saturday, something I don't normally am all that tempted to do. I'm usually pretty used to kind of being in the press box. On Saturday, though, when Bowers got the touchdown, and I promise you we're going to talk more about Bowers here a lot coming up in a moment. When he got his touchdown, I literally almost just jumped right up and just, let out a big yell because it was just such a special thing. Kaylee Manziel, who was sitting beside me, said, "Why am I crying right now?" And I just sort of felt kind of the same type of vibe. It was just extremely, extraordinarily emotional. And the cool thing is, as I said before, a lot of stuff sort of hits me that way because I just am kind of an emotional person, I guess, sentimental probably to a fault sometimes. But it also seems like other people had a very similar experience with that game on Saturday. There were so many former players coming back, and there was so many special moments like in between the live action, and it seemed to like really hit Kirby Smart in sort of a big way there as well. And if you would say someone like me, sort of a sentimental old fool, a little bit, silly about some of that kind of stuff, you don't really think of Kirby Smart necessarily being that way, right? Kirby's, tougher guy than I am for sure, probably. And you sort of think about him oftentimes being sort of the very typical football coach related to some of this kind of stuff. But Kirby himself was also, I think, really moved by the emotion. We're actually going to play here for a couple of minutes a little bit more audio than we sometimes do to begin a show because I thought that Kirby Smart really struck all the right notes in his post-game press conference of describing on Saturday what really was more than just a win. And for like one night, This didn't seem to be so much like about the go for 3 and 23 and moving up number 1 in the college football playoff rankings and getting ready to, play Alabama again in the SEC championship. Trust me, we're going to get to all of that over the course of the week. All of that is still a very relevant conversation. This just sort of seemed like a moment to kind of pause and appreciate the era in which we're living through. And who knows where it goes this year. I mean, honestly, I think the landscape right now for the national championship is actually really competitive. I think that Georgia has a great chance to win it, and I also think other teams feel like they have a great chance there as well. We're going to see some really interesting football coming up in the weeks and months to come, and who knows how all that ends. But Saturday was sort of a moment to just sort of look around and say, do you believe this is our real life right now? That this is the football team that we watched, I cover, we talk about, these players who are back? This is it. This is what we're doing here right now. We could have been born 50 years from now or 50 years ago and missed this, but we're all, kind of in our prime. Some people younger than me, some people older than me, but we're all kind of going through all of this right now at the same time, and it's really pretty amazing. And Kirby Smart seems to really get that too, which I'm very happy to hear. And the first thing that he talked about on Saturday was just kind of the emotion of saying goodbye to seniors. Obviously, it means something to all of us, but you better believe it especially means something to him because he knows these guys so intimately. So to talk about why it was such a special night, why there was so much emotion around the win, Kirby Smart started with senior night on Saturday. This is what Kirby had to say.
They've been special to me, and got a little emotional tonight when I saw some of those guys running on the field during that time. I think it's a really hard night when you say bye and then you got to go out and compete and play. But a lot of respect for our seniors, a lot of respect for our fan base, and to turn out and be electric and make a difference in the game.
I mean, did you feel that if you were there? Did you notice that if you're watching on TV? It just felt different. Kirby Smart himself said, I'm super emotional about this. Fans are going crazy. And by the way, all the talk last week of, hey, no wine and cheese fans, rough and rowdy, be loud, call was answered. The atmosphere, the mood in the stadium was incredible. It was unbelievable. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. So Kirby says, hey, I'm kind of moved by that. I'm moved by senior night, what these seniors have meant to this program and how much they have meant to me personally. And then you kind of go on to, the idea that you've also got so many former players who were there as well. You saw Nolan Smith as the guest picker on ESPN's College Game Day. Jordan Davis was back. Stetson Bennett was back. We'll get more to Stetson in a moment. But so many of these former players are showing their love for UGA by being back and by cheering this team on and pumping these guys up, guys who are maybe role players or backups or just guys waiting in the wings when Georgia was winning its last 2 national championships. Now this is their team and their time to shine, and all of that is a part of the emotion of the moment there as well. Kirby Smart went into more detail on that about why so many people were just so moved by everything that happened in this Georgia win. Here's more of Kirby being very candid about all of that.
Yeah, no doubt it makes a presence. It makes more confidence. I mean, I'm looking over there at guys, and they're looking over there at those guys, and I'm teared up coming off the field, and Jordan's like, I'm crying too, Coach. Those are my babies. Those are my babies. He helped raise a lot of those guys. So it's emotional. So many sacrifices are made to make this program what it is, and our fans have been really good to us and helped us at home.
I mean, I'm just so glad to hear Kirby Smart saying this because at first I thought I was crazy, right? Because I was like, almost moved to tears almost the entire day, right? It's like the last game in the press box. I remember going to that press box for the first time in 2004. What a big deal that was to me to kind of be invited, what I thought was sort of backstage, for Georgia football at that particular time. Fans don't really care about where the media sits, but that's been kind of a big deal to me. And that was the last time in that press box. Georgia did a very nice thing. I'll bring this in at some point this week. Gave out coins to kind of commemorate that. I was really moved by that. Anytime I'm lucky enough to have my family there, I'm always really grateful for that. And so I'm sort of moved by that. I just sort of miss Georgia football when the offseason comes and, just sort of soak up that final, home game. I moved by that. And when the fans really did kind of respond exactly the way that Kirby had challenged them to, which I knew they would, but still, when you're in an experience like that, and if you're, lucky enough to have been there, I know you felt this way, and if you weren't lucky enough to be there, trust me when I tell you, I wish you, could have been there. But when you're just a part of all of that and like 93,000 plus kind of all moving as one, all of that energy pointed in such a positive way towards the field. And so many guys who played for this program and contributed great success to this program, choosing to come back and spend that Saturday night kind of being fans themselves, Like, how can you not be moved by that? I clearly was. It was also, Veterans Day weekend. You had a great tribute by the Redcoat Band, during the half, something they've done before, but it still just sort of hits you in a very positive way when you experience, that there again. Like, how could you not be moved by that? And it's one thing for someone like me, kind of overly sentimental, to say that, but when Kirby Smart and Jordan Davis are like crying together after the game's over with, I mean, that kind of gives you an idea. There was something going on Saturday that just sort of felt like something. And it's just a really cool thing to be a part of. And in fact, Kirby went into kind of more detail here about the idea that right now, this time at the University of Georgia is just a really big time to be a part of the UGA community. Frankly, whether you graduated from Georgia or not, it's just a cool time in the history of our state, a cool time in the sort of history of this university. And, Kirby Smart was in a little bit of a reflective mood about some of that on Saturday. Here's more from Kirby on that.
Incredible university. I think President Morgan just told me we're one of the only SEC schools to have a Rhodes Scholar this year. I mean, we're winning in academics. We're winning in football. We're winning in soccer. We're winning in a lot of sports. Josh Brooks and his staff do an incredible job. I'm fortunate to be part of an unbelievable organization in a great state where football is important. High school state playoffs are going on right now. There's tons of good players all over our state, and people care about football in the state. So these seniors, they've done it the hard way. They've done it the hard way. They've earned it, and got a lot of respect, man. You don't realize what they sacrifice with the way we practice.
Yeah, I mean, I just think you kind of hear Kirby. He's kind of all over the place. I don't mean that in a bad way, but he's just sort of like kind of just sort of spitballing about everything that's in his mind right now. We practice so hard. These seniors endure all of that. It's a fun time for the state because I love high school football too, and you have these great games on Friday kind of rolling into a college game on Saturday. I think that November's about the best time of year, right? You're kind of moving into the holiday time of year, but you've got the high school season that wraps up before you get there, and y'all know how much I love that. Georgia's playing its biggest games here right now, and Kirby's just sort of spitballing about all of this. Gosh, the great success that the university's enjoying, the fact you got other teams like the soccer team, making a big move in the NCAA tournament, which is kind of a cool new thing. Seems to be a lot of energy around Mike White right now, and Wes Johnson, the baseball coach. It's just sort of a good, fun time to be around UGA, and Smart's just sort of riffing on all of that at one time there, which just sort of gives you a feeling it was just sort of an amazing thing. And then obviously the football was dominant. It's a top 10 team. Georgia just absolutely just blasted them. Was 52-17 is the final. Gave up a couple of touchdowns early, but Georgia, the offense, is just racking up 600 yards, 50-something points. Jamon Dumas-Johnson's not able to play, but, C.J. Allen steps up in a big way and certainly has the look of a future star. We're kind of back at that time of year. A year ago, it's a guy like Javon Bullard, who's an MVP-level player for you in so many like postseason type moments, and now we're back at the most crucial games again for Georgia, and right on time, Javon Bullard gets a massive interception near the end of the first half that kind of ended any chance Ole Miss was going to have to sort of establish enough momentum to stay competitive in this football game. Nazir Stackhouse for a second week in a row is making a huge play. Last week it's the interception. This week it's the sack, and it's just like all this good stuff for Georgia is happening on the way to a dominant win against a recognizable face in Lane Kiffin and a highly ranked opponent in Ole Miss. And Georgia goes on to win now its 27th straight game, like putting Smart in the conversation of the Nick Sabans and the Bear Bryants in terms of the long winning streak that Georgia's currently on right now. And Kirby was also happy to reflect on some of that on Saturday there as well, that the run that Georgia is on right now, very few in the history of college football have ever had it better than Georgia has it right now. Kirby also talked about that.
Rare air. I mean, those guys are guys I grew up watching as a little kid, growing up in Alabama with my dad being a high school coach. And a lot of the credit goes to the people that have come to this university and played, the players who've made those sacrifices, the players who helped win those games. I mean, I'm in the locker room today, and I was looking at Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, Miko, Malik Herring, Brian Herring. It's just all these guys that made sacrifices to do this and make it special. And I've had incredible coaching staffs. So great coaches make head coaches look smart.
Yeah, it's hard to be that good, whether you're a coach, whether you're a player. the success that Georgia's enjoying, you don't get there without tremendous sacrifice. And Smart is right to talk about that as much as he does, and it sort of fits the sort of reflective mood of, gosh, can you believe this team's won 27 straight games? And the hope is that streak keeps going and going and going. The hope is you go for 3-23 as well, and obviously we believe that's what Georgia's going to do. But it's also appropriate, and senior night sort of felt like the right time to do that. So many friendly and familiar faces back on campus, the right time to do that, just sort of pause and say, man, this is really pretty neat and pretty special, and these are lifelong memories that are being forged for the guys on the field or those of us sitting in the stands. These are things we'll be remembering for the rest of our lives here. It's all playing out in front of us. And I think one of the things that sort of made all of that so real for me on Saturday was, so I know the commercial timeouts kind of get long, and if you weren't in the stadium, perhaps you're not as aware of this, but like every time they would go to break in between the action, they're like trotting out like some all-time great and bringing him back. I mean, I saw David Green, the former Georgia quarterback, before the game. So great to catch up with David for a quick second. And there was the great photo at one point in time, I believe Aaron Murray shared it, of Murray and Green and Shockley and Stetson Bennett all together, these very successful Georgia quarterbacks. But it just sort of seemed like every moment it's like, oh, there's Nolan Smith. Here's Brian Harmon, the British Open champion, was on hand there. And then there was obviously two very special moments where Stetson Bennett, who obviously so many of us have sort of sent so many prayers in the direction of, he seemed to be doing great. He was honored as the Burlsworth recipient for the top walk-on in college ball a year ago. Mark Richt was there in celebration of the fact that Coach Richt's about to go in the College Ball Hall of Fame, and there's these like thunderous of ovations for these guys, and it was just like every commercial timeout they're like bringing back like some all-time great. And there's this huge eruption that takes place, and once again Kirby Smart talked about that, and it's kind of funny the way that Smart says it. All of a sudden, all of this sort of putting pressure on Georgia. Hey, on a night like this, you got to make sure you take care of business here because everybody's having a really good time, and we don't want that spoiled by some sort of loss here. Once again, Kirby Smart very good in reflecting back on all of that.
I didn't get to see Stetson. I mean, I looked on the video board and saw him. I saw Coach Rick. What a great honor. And I was like, golly, man, we can't mess this game up with all these dudes here. I mean, it was a tight ball game, and I'm looking up there like going through all my whole past of working for Coach Rick, honoring Coach Rick, College Football Hall of Fame, his wife, what they've meant to this community, what they meant to me. Gave me a job when I didn't have one, and just incredible people, just unbelievable people. And then see Stetson. And I've seen Stetson a couple times around, but I hadn't really got to spend time with him. It's just so consumed.
So, yeah, I mean, it was that kind of night to see Bennett, to see Coach Richt, and the great ovations they got, all contributing to the huge level of energy created by Georgia fans from the word go. The team obviously fed on that, and Georgia's had a lot of really special wins here over the course of the last 27 straight, but I don't know that any perhaps felt more fun. That's just the right word. It was fun. It was enjoyable. You felt more connected to the people around you. It was just an incredible, incredible experience, and a great chance for a lot of us to say thank you. Thank you to Coach Smart for being the architect of all of this. Thank you to the players, past and present, who've contributed to all of this. Obviously anticipating what's going to happen next and excited about all the big games yet to come. But sometimes it's appropriate to sort of pause and reflect. And Saturday night, I was very thankful to have been where I was, very thankful for the people I got to share it with, and just really, really, really excited about the idea that this is the moment that we're all living through here right now. A terrific team on a terrific run, and a whole lot of fun on Saturday night. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented today by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia, and we are happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, and on the DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that across all video platforms. We're on the radio on App and Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We're available as a podcast, wherever you find them there as well. Just however you connect with our show. We are just so grateful for you doing that today. We're obviously in a great mood today after a huge win for Georgia on Saturday against Ole Miss, and really excited about what comes next, but also really excited about great sponsors who make stuff like this possible for us on a daily basis, such as our friends at Pella, Window, and Door of Georgia today. It's our final time to be at home for Georgia this past Saturday, but obviously when you think about being at home and cozy and comfortable at home, that's one of the things that Pella, Window, and Door of Georgia can do for you on a regular basis, because those energy-efficient windows and doors, that superior product that they're famous for, makes your home feel better on the inside, look better on the outside. That is what they are all about. So if you want to be a good homeowner and a great neighbor to those in your community, taking the best care of your home is obviously the best way to do that. And there's no better way to show the love and care your home deserves than equipping it with the kind of energy efficient windows and doors that Pella is famous for. Now, you've heard us talk about this now for a long time, and so the obvious next step for you is to reach out and contact one of those Pella experts and let them describe to you the entire product line here, your installation options, if necessary, your financing options. And you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can go by and see them in their experience center right there in Duluth. I love that because it's kind of a cool building, and it's a really great way to kind of put your hands on the product, sort of recognize, why is it better? Why is it different? Why is this going to, perhaps, save me money on my energy bills, or perhaps one day, increase my resale value? Why does this kind of work that way? And the folks at Pella can kind of explain that to you. And sometimes seeing the product with your own eyes in that experience center in there in Duluth makes that a little bit easier to understand. But beyond that, if you would rather have them come to you, they're more than happy to do that. If you'd rather connect and meet virtually, they're also able to do that with you there as well. Just do this. Give them a call, 678-638-1429. That's the phone number, 678-638-1429. You can also find them online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. I appreciate using that website, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. I just want you to do me a favor. Tell them that I said they would take good care of you, because I've been recommending heartily and easily and enthusiastically. I've been recommending Pella Window and Door for a long time, and I do truly believe that for your home, it's the best thing to make it feel as good as it can, to look as good as it can. The great next step for you is equipping that house with Pella Windows, Pella Doors. So please find them online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation, or give them a call, 678-638-1429. By the way, how about great savings here now as well, because between now and November 25th, 10% off your entire project, no payments, no interest for 12 months, plus an additional $500 off your project there as well. So a couple of great saving options for you right now there as well. So check them out today. All right, we're going to get John Stinchcomb coming up in just a moment. Prior to that, though, I want to get ready to go around the doghouse, and I want to talk more about the big moment from Saturday that was the return of Brock Bowers. And obviously, Bowers is amazing. And, I think the chatter had been, okay, well, Bowers going to dress out. Bowers may play some. And I was sort of content to leave it at that. The idea of, hey, sort of a token appearance in what is we believe going to be his final home game, that ceremonially, however, ceremonial is the right way to say that. Sort of ceremonial standpoint, he's got the uniform on, he can be appreciated, but not ready yet to see Bowers be like a huge contributor as of yet. That's going to come later on. Try to sort of short sell this as a way of just not quite getting too much in the way of expectations here. But obviously, Brock Bowers just massively exceeds our expectations over and over and over again. And this is the latest example of that. And I think sometimes when people wonder, what is the job of the media? What's the media supposed to do? And this is one of the things that I think the sports media hopefully can do well. It's when history's playing out in front of our eyes, we need to properly articulate that. We need to properly amplify that. There's always going to be a good team. There's always going to be good players. There's always going to be moments in a season that matter. But there are some things that that sort of matter more than others. And there are some players that sort of transcend the normal. And Bowers is obviously that. Brock Bowers is one of the 2, 3, 4 greatest players in the history of this program. He is one of the best players in the recent history of college football. We've tried to amplify that well here over the course of the last couple of years. That shows like this, perhaps at times given to hype. I think that hype can be fun, but there are some players that sort of defy all attempt at hyping them because they just keep getting better and keep reminding you that no matter what your ability might be to describe things, their ability to be better than your description, they're just going to meet that moment each and every time, and Brock Bowers is one of those guys. Obviously, he did catch a touchdown on Saturday, proved himself to almost be superhuman in his ability to recover from the ankle injury that he suffered in the Vanderbilt game, the tightrope surgery that he went through, the most successful tightrope since the Flying Wallendas, perhaps. And it's just an amazing thing to see Bowers back doing what he did as quickly as he did. Kirby, as you would imagine, talked a lot about that on Saturday, starting with this on what Kirby kind of expected to see from Brock tonight and what his sort of anticipation was for Bowers in his return. This is Kirby on that.
I didn't have an expectation for Brock. I thought Brock would do what he could, and Brock was hell-bent to get back out there. And, I knew, I don't remember when it was. I can't remember the exact time, so don't quote me on it. But I was watching film of practice and there was a red blur back behind the film of the play I was watching. It was about 20 yards behind it, and it looked like a guy flying across the field. And I was like, who is that? And I was like, oh my God, it's Brock. And I knew we had a chance then. And he's different. He took a path that no one takes on that injury, and just said, this is what I'm doing.
A lot of comparison between Brock Bowers and a superhero. That's actually a really good superhero name. The Red Blur. You know, mild-mannered Brock Bowers by day, the Red Blur by night. You know, you sort of feel like that's a kind of a good thing there for Bowers, and a great story from Kirby about exactly what Brock has done to sort of be back in the moment that he is there, and in terms of, you know, the idea that you know, Kirby did believe it was at least conceivable that he could do this. And now getting a chance to sort of see that with his own eyes, Kirby on Bowers again.
It was a belief that he could do it. He would have to do something special. And remember the day after it happened, his mother and father called, and they wanted to be aggressive with it, and they wanted to treat it. And one of the best things for it is to get back on it and get it moving, not let it stiffen up. And you know, we had experience with other guys that it had taken longer, and he took a really aggressive approach to it, and he's different.
I think you take two things from what Smart's saying there. Thing number one is this isn't being done recklessly. This isn't one of those things of like, oh gosh, we just need you so bad that we're going to throw caution to the wind and just get you back out there somehow, some way. No, clearly a lot of thought and care was put into this in terms of, you know, what really is good in a situation like this and what is kind of an acceptable timeline in a situation like this. You clearly hear that from Kirby Smart. But the other thing you hear here is that Bowers' parents, you know, kind of part of Team Brock there, so to speak, you know, they want to be aggressive about that. You know, they want to, hey, we want to show how well Brock can recover from this, and we want to be as aggressive as we possibly can be, playing again as quickly as possible, which is obviously not the tack that everyone would take in a situation like that. And that also came up with Kirby a little bit on Saturday. You know, this notion that, you know, maybe there are some that thought that Bowers would be better off not playing again, packing it in and getting ready for the NFL draft, staying safe and staying cautious. And Smart's message to them, Bowers' message apparently to them, could not be more clear, totally unmistakable. These are strong words from Kirby on Bowers from Saturday night. Take a listen, one more here on Kirby speaking about Bowers' return and those who perhaps said that he shouldn't do it.
Well, people called him and told him that, and those people will not be representing him, I can promise you that, because all I did was piss him off. And he said, God, I had people call and tell me that I shouldn't play, Coach, and he said, that just drives me crazy. He wants me to play, makes me want to play more to prove them wrong. He said, why am I in this game if I'm not going to come back and play? I mean, he's not risking millions, guys. He's has an opportunity to get more millions. Like, it's the other way. It's not the way because he's a great player. The NFL knows people heal. Like, they heal from that injury. They've had tons of that same injury in the NFL. So all he did was go out and stamp himself as a warrior that said, I'm going to go ahead and practice on Tuesday in front of 15 scouts. Then I'm going to practice on Wednesday in front of 12 scouts, and they're all going to be over there going, oh, my God. And he's got an opportunity to move up because of who he is.
Stamping himself as a warrior is such a great phrase, and that's what Kirby says to mention Brock Bowers there. And I believe that everything that Kirby says is 100% true. This isn't just about protecting what you have. It's also about demonstrating what you can be. And to any NFL team who perhaps going to make a decision to draft Bowers in the top 5, I believe they should. I just believe Bowers is that special a talent. You know, Bowers, I think, has demonstrated himself to be more than just a good player in a year, something there always is. That Bowers perhaps is in a special category. And coming back the way that he has, I think certainly speaks to the special nature of him as a player. But beyond that, and this is important, and after this we're going to bring on John Stinchcomb. Beyond that, it also speaks to something that's special about Georgia as a team. Because while Bowers has his own NFL future to think about here, you don't come back to this team unless you believe this team's got something special going for it there too. So the whole idea of go for 3 in 23 and playing Alabama again coming up in the SEC championship, all of that's at stake here. Bowers not only is just wired different that he wants to compete, but he believes that the guys he's competing alongside, they want to do that too, and they all want this to go on as long as it possibly can. if you're a Georgia fan, I think you take that to be a very good thing. And that is Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily here today. Now, before we bring on John Stinchcomb, let me also do a quick shout out here and there as well. That coming up on Saturday, many of you know this, big day for DawgNation. It is DawgNation Invasion on the Tennessee River. And we are so excited about all of that. And we cannot wait to enjoy, with those of you who are lucky enough to be there, we can't wait to enjoy this with you and can't wait to celebrate on the East and all the cool stuff going on with UGA right there on the Tennessee River. This is unlike anything that DawgNation's ever done. And I want to personally thank our friends at R.S. Andrews, of course, Dari, good friend of ours here and someone who's been great for us over the years. R.S. Andrews, you know, they will be a big part of this. Our friends at Kroger, big part of this there as well. The folks at the Dog Cave as well. I'm going to be telling you a lot about the Dog Cave here coming up in the weeks to come. You're going to love hearing about what they've got going on here. Great sponsors who've made this all possible. R.S. Andrews, Kroger, and the Dog Cave. Big, big thanks. Can't wait to see you all on the Tennessee River on Saturday as Georgia goes up to Neyland Stadium with the hopes of a 28th straight win on its mind. DawgNation Invasion on the Tennessee River coming up on Saturday. Big thanks to R.S. Andrews, Kroger, and the Dog Cave for making it all possible. All right. So we're running a little bit late here. Let me see if I can pick up the pace here and bring on our good friend, the great former Georgia All-American. You know how much he enjoyed everything that was seen there on Saturday. How about a Marlo's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb here today?
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So much to talk to John Stinchcomb about here as a part of a Marlo's Tavern Insider Update with a Georgia win that was against Ole Miss on Saturday. But, John, if you don't mind, let's begin where I just was discussing the return of Brock Bowers here. It even exceeded my expectations for Brock. And at this point in time, I've about decided he can do anything. But even with that as my own backdrop here, Brock goes out and surprised me yet once again. I mean, what does it say about him as a player, perhaps Georgia as a team, that this is the level of dedication that he wants to show right now to be back, on the football field in a game that his team probably could have won without him. And yet he still wanted to be there because that's how insatiable his appetite for competition seems to be. Boy, it's a great thing to see with your own eyes, is it not?
Absolutely incredible. I think it's a testament to who he is. And you're talking about the character makeup. When he first goes down, you're going, there's a lot of guys that would say, I'm moving on. I'm getting ready for the NFL draft, and I don't want to hurt my stock with further injuries and all the other excuses and reasons to why, you can explain away, I don't want to play anymore for Georgia. And Brock's a guy that he proved, I want nothing more than my team to be able to rely on me, and fought his way back quicker than most folks would even think possible. In a game that, even when it was pretty clear what was in hand and at hand, he took more reps than almost anybody out there.
Yeah.
So a real testament to the character that he has, the commitment he's made to his team, and I think just another feather in the cap for someone who continues to identify as one of the truly special talents that Georgia's ever possessed.
Yeah, and I love the way you say that because we're in a day and age in which there are so many very good and special players who've come through Georgia football. A lot of those guys were back in attendance on Saturday, and because you've got such a large ensemble of greatness, so to speak, it can be difficult to give anybody the individual attention they deserve. And I think that Bauer sometimes has perhaps suffered from that because, John, I think it's been perhaps for some a little slow to realize that this is one of the greatest players in this program's history. And from an individual standpoint, if you had to pick one guy who I believe individually the best during this championship run, which I hope continues again here this year, I believe, Brock's that guy. We said back during the winter that there was a Mount Rushmore of Georgia football. Bowers was already on it after just 2 seasons, and he's only added to that legacy here during his third. I think that, shows like this, we're always going to brag on whoever the best Georgia players are. That's just sort of what we do. But there's also a special category, and Bowers is in a special category. And I think for me, the fun thing about this year has been is that for everyone now, there's no denying it. It's total acceptance of the fact that this isn't just this year's version of a really good player. No, this is someone that the history books will have recorded, tales for and accolades for many decades to come.
Yeah, he's continued to put together a resume, a body of work that distinguishes him among some truly elite talent that Georgia has seen throughout the years. And there's been really good players on some very average teams and some really good players on some great teams. And yet he is the best player on the best teams that Georgia has ever fielded. And when you're back-to-back national champions and you're still undefeated and well on your way into that third campaign, and you say, what's this tie that binds? And it's this uniquely gifted tight end, wide receiver, blocking, extra lineman at times, who's willing to do anything and everything that his team needs and asks. And that's Brock Bowers. And even this past Saturday, where he's coming back from injury, it's not always the focal point, but I guarantee that defense is well aware of where 19 is on the field. And even when they know where he's at, he's still able to come away with a touchdown. Time and time again is a testament to the unique talent that he is and has earned and will continue to earn the distinction of one of the very best, if not the very best, to come through Georgia.
I want to stay on Bauer's side of the ball here for a moment, because to kind of make this more about football here just for a second, I think the one thing that Saturday can also show us with this Georgia offense, they pile up the big numbers, right? It's like, Kendall Milton kind of gives you the best game perhaps of his Georgia career on Saturday. Georgia's also throwing the ball all over the yard there as well. 600-plus yards, 50-plus points. I really think the message that Georgia may have sent on Saturday, and I do believe it's kind of sort of, it's the type of performance that sends a message. Here's the message that I think this perhaps, sends is, of the team that we kind of think of as competing for the national championship, I believe that Georgia may be the best offensive team of the bunch. Washington scored a bunch of points. Florida State's got really good wide receivers. Steve Sarkisian, obviously Texas, really sharp offensive mind. Michigan, clearly capable of doing a lot of things. Saturday they were mostly content to run the ball, but when you look at the crop of teams competing for the national championship, there are a lot of them that can be good on that side of the ball, but it's kind of a different identity for me for Georgia right now that it's been in the past. They're still complimentary. They still want to be very good on both sides of the ball, but the level of explosiveness that Georgia showed on the offensive side on Saturday, John, I believe right now that makes them just about unlike almost any other national championship contender here right now, that actually may be Georgia's ticket to success this year if this season finishes the way we want it to.
Yeah, and let's start with Kendall Milton. I think he needs to get a little more pub because he just looks different right now. The way he's running, the way he's breaking tackles, and his explosiveness through the holes, it is a huge boost. And also, while we're throwing out accolades, all those who were concerned about Mike Bobo during the first part of this season, where we're going, we're not blowing people out by 75 points. I'm disappointed. All those naysayers have been silenced, because in these big games, which is exactly what we said, how are you going to truly evaluate Mike Bobo and this offensive staff?
That's right.
It's going to be in these big games, and you look at the what they put together on Saturday, these past couple of Saturdays, and you go, these were big games, and they have embarrassed and dismantled some pretty talented defenses, especially against that Missouri team. And it's because of that. Let's continue on. Carson Beck, where it's like, I don't know about this guy. Is he just a manager? Is he's missing these open throws down the field? That's going to really cost us. And now you're saying this guy could be a first-round talent come April in the NFL draft. So as we evaluate this team and you get a bigger body of work to points of data to kind of analyze, and these big games that have occurred against Missouri, and now College game day comes to town, and you embarrass an Ole Miss team. This offensive group is showing how versatile they are, their resiliency when Bowers was not available, now that he's back, just how truly dangerous they can be. And I think once you continue to add these pieces back that have been struggling with injury, Amarius Mims being another one, it has allowed for the development of a number of players, and you can see an identity that's being created from this offense that is second to none. Washington, that's a dangerous offense coming out of the West, but overall, does that team scare you? I don't think so. I don't think there's a more complete picture than what Georgia has. Here's
the other thing about Saturday on the offensive side of the ball. You've got Amarius Mims, who I believe is like a future first-round type talent, perhaps. He's back. Bowers is back. Ladd McConkey is now seemingly fully back. You really haven't had those three guys together at any point this year. You've had you had all of Bowers, then you had none of Bowers, and that's when McConkey stepped up, and now Mims, who's been gone, now he's back. I mean, this was also a little glimpse of what the fully operational version of the Georgia offense could perhaps look like. And my gosh, Ladd McConkey is just a playmaker. I mean, he's just such a weapon to get behind defenses. And the idea that down the stretch you might be able to kind of involve both Bowers and McConkey together to go along with everything else that Georgia's doing, perhaps finding its running game with Kendall Milton at the exact right time to go along with the stuff that Dajon Edwards has already been able to provide. And that was the other thing about Saturday is, okay, so this is what this offense can look like as guys start to get fully healthy, and you kind of realize, wow, Georgia's really played a lot this season without guys who are sort of bona fide playmakers, and this is now maybe the new normal for the rest of the season moving forward.
Oh yeah, I mean it is provided opportunity because of Ladd not being available, because of Brock not being available, really because of our running backs early on in the season still coming back from injury, Dajon Edwards included, and obviously Kendall Milton. It has forced this offense, forced Mike Bobo and company to find different answers, and it's made them a better team. This offense is a better group because of it. Now, as you're going into the final part of regular season, and what's more important to Georgia than postseason play, you have your full complement. You get Brock, you got Ladd, who both those guys can take over games. You get guys healthy like Amarius back, and during his absence, you've been able to develop multiple other players at other positions. Xavier Truss showed competence at the tackle position. Dylan Fairchild and Micah Morris get in and get more reps on the interior, and it's made you a better group. It's provided some opportunities, and candidly, some guys weren't able to step into that quite as well as you thought they might, specifically out of that wide receiver room. Mm-hmm. But a healthy Ladd and Brock and full company, that's a very dangerous offense that has a number of weapons that, defenses are going to have to kind of choose and pick their poison because there's just too many weapons on the field.
It is our Marlo's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily. And, of course, while John is our DawgNation Insider, we all have a chance to be insiders at Marlo's Tavern. And trust me when I tell you, that is the next best thing because you're going to get a chance to get great incentives just for signing up. When you go to marlostavern.com or the Marlo's Tavern app, just for signing up to be a part of the Marlo's Tavern Insiders Club, which, by the way, is free to join, you're going to get $10 off your $30 order at Marlo's just for doing that. Then after that, you earn what are called qualified visits. That means you go to a Marlo's Tavern, you spend at least $15 on food or beverage, and as you earn these qualified visits, once you get 4 of those qualified visits, you're signed up to receive a complimentary entree reward up to $20 on your next visit to the Marlo's Tavern, perhaps the one right here in your neighborhood. You also get great special offers on your birthday there as well. Just a lot of really good stuff going on when you become a member of the Marlo's Tavern Insider Club. So please go to marlostavern.com to find out more about this. That's MARLOWS, marlostavern.com to find out more about that today. So, John, in the time we have left, I want to do something that Kirby Smart was not really willing to do on Saturday. Now, Smart was in a very contemplative mood. He was, willing to talk about his emotions and things like that. But the one thing that Smart was not willing to reflect on too much was winning the SEC East again for what is now for a third straight year for Georgia, but obviously kind of become a little bit of a regularity for this program. And for me, it's a big deal because it is the last time that Georgia will get to, as we say around here, own the East. Divisional play is obviously coming to an end here after this season. So, Smart's more focused on Tennessee, more focused on Georgia Tech, and I do have to admit, I think that Tennessee game is going to probably be a little tougher than some Georgia fans perhaps realize on Saturday. I might be a little bit of a wet blanket about that here this week. But kind of pushing that aside for a moment, John, what does it mean to you as someone who was a part of the first Georgia football team to ever win the SEC East, that Georgia became the last team to ever win the SEC East here in 2023, and kind of now making that just an expectation for the program?
Yeah, and it's just how much the bar has been raised with Coach Smart and his staff. The expectation has become national championships, and we all know, those of us who've been a part of the program for years, that owning the East has not always been the easiest accomplishment.
Right.
And just to have that as a goal was a lofty one. And, with the likes of a very capable Tennessee and Florida, there were a number of years where it wasn't a foregone conclusion that Georgia would have a legitimate charge at that opportunity. And now it's an expectation. And I think it's a testament to where the program has been developed and what Coach Smart has been able to make realistic for this entire fan base. But it's one of those things where you just can't overlook the fact that that's a big deal. And once again, for the last time, as the paradigm changes, to be able to represent the East, that is quite an accomplishment. And it fits a much bigger picture that Coach Smart and his staff has been able to create for the rest of us. But it's something to be proud of, and I think, again, it's just a testament to how far this program has come.
Here's the other thing, too, and I'll say this quickly. I think this year's SEC championship game sets up to be a huge one. The last couple of years, you saw a situation where I think that Georgia could have rightly felt like its ticket to the college football playoff was already punched before it got to the SEC championship game. I don't believe that can be said this year. It's just one of those years in which the teams kind of ranked in that sort of top 8, kind of where Georgia and Bama currently are. They're not losing. Texas has lost once. Florida State hasn't lost at all. Oregon's only lost once. Washington's still undefeated. Michigan, Ohio State, both still undefeated. That you've just got a situation right now where the teams kind of ranked around Georgia in that sort of top 8 right now. They're all winning their games. And as long as you've got Power 5 unbeaten conference champions, you're looking at playoff spots that are likely to be occupied by non-SEC teams and non-conference runner-up teams. We've seen a conference runner-up make the playoff now 2 years in a row, Big Ten last year, SEC the year before, but that can't be rightly expected, at least right now. Maybe that changes the next few weeks, but as of right now, it looks like these two behemoths, Georgia and Alabama, may be playing for only one playoff spot, and certainly there's going to be a lot of love now given to Alabama for the fact they seemingly have sort of figured some things out here. I get the impression we're going to be playing in one of the most hyped up SEC championship games in quite some time when Georgia takes on Alabama coming up here in just a few weeks.
Yeah, and they're talented, and they're getting hot and right at the right time. They're a very dangerous team. If we're going to look at the national landscape, I don't know if there is a more dangerous team right now than this Alabama group. They're playing with confidence. Jalen Milrose looking every bit as dangerous as what they were hoping for at the beginning of the season coming out of Tuscaloosa. It seems like they've answered a lot of their questions on the defensive side of the ball. That the era of Nick Saban has, he's jumped the shark. Those conversations have long since ceased. And remember Paul Feinbaum saying that that this dynasty is over, and now they look like one of the most dangerous teams in the country. So that seems to be the Alabama way, where they find a way to continue to be a part of the conversation. And that SEC championship game is going to be a major have a major impact on who gets to represent themselves and their conferences in the CFP, because if there remains other teams that are undefeated, it's going to be really hard to justify in that committee for two teams to come out of the SEC. And so it seems to be that game that the entire country is going to have circled, because it very easily could be the equivalent of the national championship game, because you're looking at two of the best teams in the country.
John, great stuff. Thank you so much for being here as part of a Marlo's Tavern Insider Update. Really, really appreciate that. I hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon, right back here on Marlo's Tavern Insider Update on DawgNation Daily.
Enjoyed it, BA. Go Dogs.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So here's the one thing I'm going to promise you. While I do believe that Georgia-Alabama in the SEC championship is going to be a massive game, and perhaps the biggest SEC championship game that Georgia's played in at any point in time here thus far in the Kirby Smart era, we are not going to overdo it on that until these next 2 weeks are done, for a couple of reasons. A, because of DawgNation Invasion on Saturday, we're legitimately excited about that, but also I'm going to get more into this throughout the week, and I don't want to be a wet blanket about this, but I do believe that college football has a way of zigging when you expect it to zag. And this may be one of those examples where Georgia's riding high, Tennessee's lower than they've been. Seemingly they've got nothing to play for. But I do believe that game is going to matter to Tennessee on Saturday. I do believe their fans are going to see some opportunity to salvage something from this season, snapping Georgia's winning streak. I do believe you probably have a more intense vibe around Neyland Stadium on Saturday than perhaps some realize. And listen, when it comes like the sort of traditional rivals for Georgia, obviously we believe a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. We believe Georgia's other traditional rival is Auburn, although the SEC may be about ready to mess this up. And in the yearly game between these two teams, nonetheless, that remains Georgia's traditional SEC rival, along with Florida. Tennessee's probably not quite the same level, but here's what I'll tell you. While fewer people consider Tennessee to be a main rival of Georgia, here's what I know. For those of you that live way up in North Georgia, or perhaps many of you who kind of have ties to the state of Tennessee, I have talked to enough of you to know this. For those of you that hate Tennessee, you hate Tennessee. This is the one thing I've discovered. For people who sort of have a certain kind of, feeling about the Georgia-Tennessee rivalry, the level of intensity that you feel is off the charts. So we're going to show respect to you all this week. For the people up there, kind of the north part of our state, who have a big feeling about this game, obviously we're going to treat it as a very big deal. Plus, it's DawgNation Invasion, and you don't want the DawgNation Invasion spoiled here. And plus, Georgia's just riding this winning streak right now. You want that to keep going as long as it possibly can. So we're going to make a very big deal about Tennessee this week, and we're going to be expecting the Tennessee fans to do the same thing. That's going to have a big game vibe on Saturday. Despite the fact the division's clinched, this is about Georgia making a run, go for 3-23, and hopefully another 15-0 season, and trying to win a 28th straight game. So we're not going to look too far ahead of the SEC championship. We believe Georgia-Tennessee on Saturday is a very, very big deal. And frankly, the season finale, the regular season finale against the in-state rival Georgia Tech, that will be top of mind for us too. So Kirby does not want to look ahead and does not want to look past. We're going to respect his wishes on that because we believe that's the right thing to do. Keep taking care of business week after week after week. That's what this team deserves. And then when you get to first Saturday in December, you better be ready for one of the most hyped games that Georgia's played in, because that's what Georgia-Alabama is going to be. We believe that's the case, assuming that Alabama keeps winning the way that it is right now. More on that in a moment. Prior to that, though, let's go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And obviously, speaking of hyping things up, I love to do that. When it comes to Royal Caribbean cruise vacations, I've gotten 2 on the docket for the upcoming year. January of 2024, I get a chance to be on Icon of the Seas, the debut of the largest cruise ship ever built. I am thrilled about that. My wife and I were talking about a little bit of that yesterday. We're excited about that. And then in April of 2024, we're all excited about the DawgNation cruise there too. And I love that because so many of you get a chance to experience what I just love, which is a chance to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship and enjoying that Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. And getting a chance to do that with all of you, for me, makes it even better. So I want you to check out Jessica Slater, great travel agent. She can help you with all your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation needs. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email Jessica, jslater@dreamvacations.com. That's jslater@dreamvacations.com. She can get you booked up, Icon of the Seas, be a part of the very first ever sail on that brand new cruise ship. DawgNation cruise on Allure of the Seas, bigger and better than it's ever been before. We want you on board to help experience that with us. all kinds of fun things going on. Jessica can tell you all about it. All right. What's not quite so fun, at least for certain SEC coaches, is we've kind of moved into the sort of bloodletting portion of the season, and we did predict this. A lot of our predictions don't turn out to be true, but this is one that is definitely going to end up being true. We said we thought this could be a very, very tough offseason in terms of coaches being fired, and it's already starting before the season comes to an end. We came in ready to talk about Jimbo Fisher, which we'll get to in a moment, but as we're getting ready to start the show today, also the hammer drops on Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. Now, the scenario here is that obviously last year Mike Leach passed away unexpectedly, incredibly sad. And from a football standpoint, you have to try to put the pieces back together as quickly as you possibly can. Zach Arnett had been a very successful defensive coordinator with Mike Leach there in Starkville. He was given a chance to be a head coach. And if you want to give him any chance of succeeding, you have to make him look like a real coach. So you give him the multi-year deal, and Arnett's going to get his shot to make this program work. And it's very interesting. Zach made a very interesting calculated risk, I guess, where he completely went away from the Mike Leach offense. Arnett's a very sort of tough-minded coach, very good defensive coach, perhaps not loving the Mike Leach offense. That's not meant to disrespect, Leach's memory, but just obvious that Arnett wanted to do something different offensively, and they go almost the complete other different direction. Our buddy Rylan Godey went there as a tight end prior to Arnett's hiring as head coach. They didn't have tight ends on that roster at all. That gives you an idea of how they were kind of changing things up. It's a big change to undergo in 1 year, and it's not been a successful year. They did win an SEC game, so you give them some credit for that. But ultimately, they got blown out by Texas A&M on Saturday. They lost badly to Kentucky the week before that. While Arnett did have a multi-year deal in place, it was sort of one of those things that was kind of like sort of in name only. It's actually a pretty cheap buyout to get out from underneath. For all intents and purposes, sort of functioned like an interim deal, even if it had the appearance of being the sort of multi-year type thing that head coaches are supposed to have. So it's actually, my understanding is, not too expensive for Mississippi State to sort of move off of Zach Arnett. And he was always going to be in a tough situation. Mississippi State was always going to be better served by having a more traditional coaching search, which now they get a chance to have. This is maybe the way this was always destined to be, unless something amazing happened. And clearly, based on the results of the last couple of weeks, something amazing is not happening. So they make the decision to move off of Zach Arnett. Like, the one thing, and this is totally me making this up, this is not news, this is not reporting, this is just me sort of wondering. Like, wouldn't this feel like a good spot for Dan Mullen to go back to? I mean, if Mullen wants to coach again, and maybe he just doesn't. Maybe he likes being on TV. Some people seem to think he does a good job there. I know he's relaxed and kind of living at Lake Oconee. I think his family's pretty plugged in over in that area too, a local school and things like that. Maybe this is all Mullen wants to do. But if he wants to coach again, going back to a place he has been successful, where you don't have the same recruiting expectations you perhaps have at Florida, which, by the way, is having a bunch of decommitments here as of late. That's probably worth paying attention to. Anyway, don't you? If Mullen's going to coach again, doesn't this feel like a pretty good spot for him to coach again? I wonder if we hear about that at all. Either way, Mississippi State's about to go through a coaching search here, parting ways with Zach Arnett. Now, the team that beat Mississippi State on Saturday was Texas A&M, but as you know, yesterday the big news around college football was the fact that A&M does officially fire Jimbo Fisher. And listen, we've obviously talked a lot about this on the show because at one point in time I thought Fisher was probably set up to win big at A&M, being a kind of a proven commodity as a national championship coach. It just clearly has not worked out. And this was the right move for A&M to make. Let's go back in time here a little bit. So when Jimbo was hired, Scott Woodward was the Texas A&M athletic director. This is Woodward's MO. He spins big on proven coaches. He did that now at his current job at LSU, bringing in Brian Kelly. He did that at his old job, Texas A&M, when it comes to Jimbo Fisher. You take a big risk on a big, expensive coach across all sports, by the way. That's Woodward's MO, and that's what they try to do with Jimbo Fisher. Now, when you ask the question of, well, how come this guy won a national championship at Florida State and had kind of a historic recruiting class in 2022 at Texas A&M and still could not win anything with the exception of a handful of wins in a pandemic year, in a year when obviously a lot of strange things were happening around college football that haven't had much staying power since then? How come he failed so badly? And the only, I think, good answer I have to that question, because here's the one thing I don't believe. And I could talk for hours about this because I do love coaching rumors and coaching search season, and I just love all this stuff. Here's the one thing I don't believe, and I'm not an A&M fan, but I'm going to stick up for A&M here for a moment. This is a program that's never won anything, and I think there are a lot of people who probably don't quite realize this. They've never won anything. Obviously, they never won anything in the SEC. They never even made the SEC championship game. I don't think they ever won. They never won the Big 12, right? They didn't really win the Southwest Conference before that. Haven't won a national championship in like 100 years, something crazy like that. Like, this is a program that, for the most part, R.C. Slocum, Jackie Sherrill, they just never won anything. They just never won anything. And some people are going to say, well, there's something in the water there that makes winning impossible. I don't believe that's the case. I believe that's probably just a string of bad luck. But in the case of the Jimbo Fisher in particular, like, why is it that Jimbo didn't win? The best answer I can give you is this, is that the thing that sort of made Jimbo before coming to Texas A&M, the thing that I would have touted about him as a top-flight coach was the string of success that you had with quarterbacks. Obviously, most famously, Jameis Winston, which ultimately was really the only quarterback he ever really won anything of note with. But then prior to that, even going back to his time as an offensive coordinator at Florida State when Bobby was still employed, at LSU prior to that, Jimbo Fisher had tutored a lot of quarterbacks who went on to be first-round picks. Now, most of these were not very good NFL quarterbacks, and it's sort of funny to run through the list, the Christian Ponders and the E.J. Manuels and the Jamarcus Russells. Like, I realize that's kind of a funny list of quarterbacks who, for the most part, were failures at the professional level, but a coach's job and the college ranks is to get a guy to the first round, and he did a lot of that. In the case of Jameis Winston, he had a truly special player. Unfortunately, though, Winston is really the only guy he's ever been able to win with. I mean, you think about Winston being kind of a Heisman-level player. Perhaps this was just sort of lightning the bottle when you had that kind of generational talent at college quarterback, not a great pro either. Jameis hasn't been, but was certainly a generational type talent at the college level. When you had that, okay, you could make a college football playoff. You could win a national championship, what they did in 2013 and then again in 2014 making the playoff. You could do that, but he hasn't been able to replicate since then. The Jimbo offense just too antiquated, probably moving a little too slow, a little too complicated perhaps. And that ultimately seems to be the thing that's really kind of hamstrung him in terms of having any real success at Texas A&M. I'll give you two other quick thoughts on this, then we're going to move on. In terms of, coaches you're going to hear about, the obvious name feels like Mike Elko, right? Elko, the current Duke coach, who's been really successful in 2 years on the job there, the former Texas A&M defensive coordinator. You could very easily make that hire, bring back a guy who's proven himself to be a good head coach, who also has a lot of familiarity with the Texas A&M situation because he was a good defensive coordinator there. You could do that. If you swing for the fences, the swing for the fences name right now is Dan Lanning. And I think that Lanning is going to be a very interesting guy here moving forward because any job that comes open, Lanning's going to be the best candidate for that job. He's just simply put the best young coach in college football right now. And I don't really count Kirby in the young category anymore. He's been on the job long enough now. The next hot thing is Dan Lanning. He's not just winning games at Oregon. They're killing it in recruiting right now. Lanning is really looking like a rising star who's essentially arrived as a top-flight coach. This is a very, very hot coaching prospect right now. And Lanning's going to get a chance to sort of chart his own path here. And I don't know the answer to this. Like, what does Lanning see right now as a better chance for him to win? Oregon in the new Big Ten or Texas A&M, let's just make that comparison, in the new SEC? I'm not sure. Like, you would say, well, do you want to go to Texas A&M given the fact that no one's ever won there? Perhaps a fair question. Do you want to stay in the Big Ten knowing that geographically you're going to be at a huge disadvantage? And that is just real, y'all. You got 4 teams way out west competing in a league whose geographic center is like right in the middle of the country. That's a little bit of a tricky thing. And plus, it's not like, while Oregon's seemingly national relevant because of the uniforms and stuff like that, it's not like they've actually won a ton there either. If I'm Lanning, I think I would probably rather be in the SEC. But when you look at the success they're having in recruiting right now and compare it to the rest of the Big Ten, like, how many teams in the new Big Ten are going to recruit better than Oregon's currently recruiting right now? Perhaps not very many. Maybe the likes of only like the Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, Lanning has a chance to make Oregon the third best program in the Big Ten from the word go. Hard not to notice that if you're currently employed there, given the fact that's not the stature Texas A&M currently has within the new SEC. So If I'm Lanning, I think the A&M job or something like that would perhaps be better than Oregon, but there is admittedly a lot to sell about Oregon right now, given the success that he's currently having. I believe that Oregon will likely be in this year's college football playoff. So, that may be a lot to walk away from if that turns out to be true. The final thought from me on this, because I know we're kind of going a little bit long here, is if you're a Georgia fan, this kind of stuff is more relevant for you than it perhaps would have been if this would happen last year or the year before, something like that. Like, it's very easy to look at Texas A&M and say, oh, that's way out west. That doesn't impact me at all. What if a guy like Dan Lanning were to go become coach there? Well, that clearly impacts you because that's a name that you know, and you would obviously recognize that as one of the rising stars in the SEC, being a guy that was on staff here. But beyond that, there's this. As we've talked about now plenty of times, there are no more divisions. Divisions are going away. So moving forward, Georgia's competing with Texas A&M as much as it's competing with Tennessee, right? I mean, the geographic stuff doesn't mean anything anymore. And so A&M getting better, if it's going to with a new coach, that's going to make the SEC a little bit harder, which is just as relevant for Georgia as it would be for Alabama. See, in the past, we would have said, oh, this is an Alabama issue, an LSU issue. This is a team they compete with in the SEC West. But now this is a team that everybody competes with in the SEC there at large. And A&M does have resources that it wants to devote to recruiting. A&M does want to win. The willingness to pay the huge buyout, upwards of $70 million, lets you know they don't want to go quietly here right now. They want to be competitive here right now. And this is relevant for Georgia because in the new world of the SEC championship starting next year, you're competing alongside A&M as much as any other team in this league in terms of who gets to Atlanta for the SEC championship and who perhaps has an inside track on one of the 12 playoff spots up for grabs starting next year. I'll very quickly give you a couple of more things here. So LSU beats Florida on Saturday. Another bad loss for Billy Napier. I didn't expect them to win, but it just, as these losses pile, it becomes an issue for Napier to deal with, especially going back to his home state of Louisiana. This is a big deal for Napier back there because, he'd been the coach at Louisiana Lafayette. LSU clearly wanted no part of Napier as its head coach. They look pretty smart in that regard right now because Napier hasn't done much in 2 years as Florida coach. Hard not to deny that. But it's actually the other side of this game I want to briefly mention just for a moment. In most years, the Heisman Trophy winner is sort of best player on best team type scenario, right? It's very often a quarterback. I would love for that to end up being true for Carson Beck this year. Obviously, we would root for Carson getting a chance to do that. But in a year so far where no one has really kind of taken a hold of the Heisman stuff, right? I mean, Michael Penix, for instance, at one point in time, the favorite for the award, has actually kind of regressed a little bit the last couple of weeks. I'm honestly not sure how he played on Saturday, but I know Washington won. But, Penix has actually kind of come back down to earth a little bit the last few weeks. J.J. McCarthy was getting a lot of hype. Michigan ran the ball 32 straight times to close the game out against Penn State on Saturday. You kind of wonder if there's too much, sort of negative buzz around Michigan for a guy like McCarthy, perhaps the sort of traditional best quarterback on best team type thing to win the award. Maybe we'll see Carson Beck benefit from that. But if it's wide open for somebody else to win, I think you've got to really strongly consider Jaden Daniels as the Heisman Trophy winner right now. I think you've really got, at the very least, make a strong push to get Daniels into New York as a Heisman finalist and not actually win the award. Obviously, LSU's lost 3 times. That's not typically the resume for a Heisman quarterback. But a few years ago, Lamar Jackson won the award playing on less than a great team. In a year in which no one's really kind of taken hold of the Heisman conversation, what Daniels did on Saturday with his arm and his legs, the stat line was just eye-popping. I think, and this is not what I thought would happen. I thought that Daniels would likely be replaced as LSU quarterback this year. I thought Garrett Nussmeier was probably the best quarterback on that roster. Daniels, though, has found an amazing gear that I frankly didn't know that he had. And I think it ought to be rewarded. That if there was ever a year for sort of a somewhat non-traditional, great player on a kind of only above average team, Daniels may just really be that guy. And so I'd kind of tout him for the award right now. Not at the expense of Carson Beck, of course. I'd love to see Beck get in there. But I think that Daniels deserves a strong consideration on what is a pretty, average LSU team. Jaden Daniels has proven himself to be a very special player. And if you missed Saturday's game between LSU and Florida, that's the real takeaway. Jaden Daniels is just amazing. He's having an amazing year. Finally, I'll give you this very quickly. So I think a lot of our space moving forward is going to be devoted to these teams that are competing alongside Georgia for the national championship. What are they doing to sort of keep pace? What you're seeing right now is a continuation of the teams that are kind of in the mix for the Pac-12, the Big 12, the ACC, alongside Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, they're just not losing. These teams are winning for now. Now, for a handful of them, it was closer than it was supposed to be. For Washington, closer than it was supposed to be against Utah on Saturday. For Oregon, slightly closer than it was supposed to be against USC. Texas, a little closer than it was supposed to be against TCU. Florida State, a little closer than it was supposed to be against Miami. But the headline is, while those games may have been closer than experts anticipated, all those teams are continuing to win. Alabama seems to be distancing itself here right now. Bunch of hype coming Alabama's way. Gets on my nerves too, probably gets on your nerves there as well. But that's one of those things that's sort of out there here right now, is that the teams kind of around that sort of top 8 number, from where Georgia is at 2 with Ohio State at 1, down to where Bama is at 8. All those teams for right now are continuing to win. Penn State, total fraud. Ole Miss, total fraud. They're eliminated from the discussion. But from 8 and above, it's not always pretty and it's not always easy, but everybody continues to win there. So very, very crowded race for the college football playoff here right now. And we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And before we wrap up here today, let me say one more time how thankful I am to our friends at Dr. Pepper, who brought the College Football Playoff National Championship Trophy to our studio on Friday. We started the show with that championship trophy that hope we see Georgia win here this year. We started this show off with that trophy sitting like right here behind me as a message for what Go for 3 and 23 is all about. What an amazing thing that was. And I would not have been able to have that if not for our friends at Dr. Pepper. So truly thankful to them. Also, I wish I could show you this. There's an entire stack of Dr. Pepper they also brought there as well. So I've got all the Dr. Pepper that I can consume for the next little bit right here in my studio with me, because they brought a whole bunch of product on Friday, which I was very happy there as well. So my message to you is Dr. Pepper truly is the one fans deserve. As we're moving into that time of year in which all the big games are taking place, don't forget Dr. Pepper is a big part of all the big games, and it needs to be a part of your game day there as well. So check out some local Dr. Pepper. Check out some Dr. Pepper wherever you're doing your shopping here locally, perhaps at your local Kroger, wherever else. Check out some Dr. Pepper here today, because Dr. Pepper is the one fans deserve. All right, long show for us. You sort of thought it probably would be. Let's roll through some golden shoes here, though, as we get ready to wrap things up here today. We got some great submissions we'll have. And by the way, the laptop's working fine again. All the stuff is full systems go. So I know I shortchanged some of y'all on golden shoes, but we're going to get them all out here this week. Mike Cloud sent this in, hashtag Go for 3 and 23. Speaking of the Big Ten and some pretenders being exposed there. He says, first it's Ryan Day whining about Lou Holtz. Then it's the assistant coach from Michigan crying after the win against Penn State on Saturday. I don't know if y'all saw that. It was a bizarre behavior. He says, I've never seen Kirby or Nick Saban do anything remotely close to that. Mike, you're right about that. Kind of embarrassing behavior from some of these Big Ten coaches. Sharon Moore, the Michigan coach as well. Just very, very strange stuff. So, Mike, we'll give you a golden shoe for that, including using the hashtag Go for 3 and 23. You love to see that. How about our next one, please? Josh Zotnik wrote in, I had my Own the East t-shirt on Saturday at the game, and Josh wrote back to me saying, B.A., that shirt's going to have to be retired to the Smithsonian. It is part of history now, in the last year that anyone's ever going to be able to own the East. He gives you hashtag Own the East. Boy, I'm going to miss that hashtag being used. But, Josh, I appreciate that. We will give you a well-deserved golden shoe for your contribution there. Certainly appreciate that. Wonderful scene there on Saturday with the Own the East t-shirt. Of course, Missouri's win against Tennessee made that possible for you, GA. How about another golden shoe winner going out to our buddy Ryan Walker, who took his own turn to make a little graphic here for the 2023 SEC East champs. Ryan's always great about stuff like that. He says the final chapter in division play. Ryan, really well done as always. 10-0, three straight SEC East champs. Final chapter in division play. On to the mustard bottle throwers. Go for 3 and 23. Go dog. Sick 'em. Ryan Walker, you're always so talented. Another example of that. And then I believe we have one more for you today. How about this from Thad Stokes? You see a wonderful picture of, he says, my son Easton essentially wearing a superhero costume to bed on his Bulldog blanket after the 52-17 beatdown of Ole Miss. Hashtag Go for 3 and 23. Hashtag Golden Shoe. Hashtag Go Dogs. You love to see that. Young fella there wearing the Brock Bowers jersey to sleep in. The nice, cozy Georgia Bulldogs blanket. Looks just like my son sleeping because he sleeps in very, very similar attire and very, very similar confines. So, Thad, that is awesome to see and a wonderful way to wrap up today's show. Well-deserved golden shoes going out to the entire Stokes family there on all of that. Really a special day in Athens, and a lot of young fans will be remembering it for a long time to come. I tell you who has no such memories? It is those lousy, stinking Gators. Decommitments galore, all kinds of a mess. 1,101 days since they've beaten Georgia. And by the way, speaking of pandemic weirdness, the only time they did was in this very strange year of the pandemic of 2020. But it's been all dogs since then, 1,101 days worth. That is our Gator Hater Updater. We'll see all of you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And that was a long one and probably about all we could have expected to do because, honestly, we didn't really get into too much of Tennessee getting beat up by Missouri. We didn't talk about Kendall as much as we could have. More on McConkey. We could have done that. Really a nice day for the Georgia defense kind of bouncing back. Injuries, Julian Humphrey, Warren Brinson. We could have done even more than that. We barely got in within an hour 15 as it is. So there you go. All right, we're going to take your comments here right now, though, so we'll talk about whatever you want to. I'll start on DawgNation.com. They've been giving me criticism lately for not actually, I'm not. I'm going to start on Facebook because I made sure that my Facebook was working today because I know my Facebook has not been working. So I hope you all are happy. I gave Zuckerberg some more of my data, my personal information, so I could interact with all of you. So I have now done that. So here it comes on Facebook. I'm actually going to start on Facebook because I don't believe I've taken Facebook comments much the last couple of days. But we're going to do that here today. And I gave Zuckerberg more of my personal information just so I could be able to do that. Philip Jordan Wells says, find that biting puppy from Saturday and put him on the golden shoe list. Funny stuff as always. James Crump, shout out to C.J. Allen. He hit a huge game. Yeah, Allen's a good player, man. And he's going to have a wonderful career at UGA, you would think. Great to see him having a big moment like that. Alan Verbanchik says, Kendall Milton needs to stay healthy from here on out. Boy, I love what I saw from him on Saturday. Ken Dagestani says that Brock Bowers is a Terminator. Certainly feels that way, doesn't it? Keith Fold says, how about a national championship update? Our dog's been on top for 670 days. You love that. Eric Ray says, what are the injuries with Brinson and Logue? Yeah, we're going to get more from Kirby. The Logue I don't know about. Brinson and Humphrey, the one that's on my mind in a big way. Maybe did I miss something with Zion Logue? Did I miss that? But we'll get, 45 minutes from now, Kirby will be speaking. Barry Watkins says, anybody see the Bulldog in the rain on game day? That dog was barking. Good to see. And I said this on Twitter on Saturday. A lot of us were having to work really hard to remember that we don't like game day anymore. When the show opened with Reese Davis quoting Clisby Clark, Pat McAfee calling the dogs, the whole scene there was really pretty good there to kind of get rolling there. I thought they did a pretty good job of that. Ryan Walker says, BA, thanks for the golden shoe today. I think we need to jump on Tennessee early and put them out of their misery. Yeah, I think you're actually right about that, Ryan, that Saturday against Tennessee would be a very good day to get off to a good, quick, early start in that you can take the crowd out of the stadium pretty quick. I think it's going to be a tough game. I think it's going to be a tough environment. I think it's always hard when you we spent 15 minutes off the top of today's show, not just my words, but Kirby Smart's words there as well. There was an incredible level of emotion for Saturday's game. And I don't quite fully understand why it all came together in quite the way that it did, but it was palpable. I'm just telling you right now, it was noticeable. And to have to go into your most hostile road environment of the season the following Saturday, I don't believe that's an easy task. We're going to take that seriously. Miriam Corbin, looking forward to being on the DawgNation Invasion. Looking forward to that too, Miriam. Can't wait to see you there. That's going to be awesome. James Crump says, what do you think about Herbstreit bringing his dog on the field? I didn't know he always did that, and frankly, I thought that was pretty weird. I have to say, I thought that was pretty weird. At first, I thought it might be Kiffin's dog. I know they make a big deal about his dog, but it was come to find out Herbstreit's dog. Not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that. Eric DeVorncy says, I'm really surprised that Allen's starting over Bowles and Wilson, but he's a beast. Yeah, I think a lot of this just sort of speaks to, I do think that that Allen was probably among the more underrated signees for Georgia a year ago. I think that's the case. And also, this was a guy who was seemingly doing very well from like the word go once he arrived here. I just think that's kind of what that was. That, this is not anything negative about either of the other two guys, but so Raylan Wilson was a very highly rated recruit out of a very prestigious program in Florida. That gave him some extra attention. Troy Bowles is the son of Todd Bowles. That probably gave him a little extra attention. And that's not to say that either one of those players won't be terrific. I think in the case of Raylan Wilson, he's kind of already showing you that he's a very good prospect in his own right. But Allen was already destined to be somewhat underrated because he didn't have those obvious pegs, right? He wasn't, as known as Wilson as a recruit, didn't have the same notoriety of last name the way that Bowles probably did. And so therefore, he probably came in slightly underrated from the get-go. But, I mean, there are a lot of people, Jeff Santel, I believe, included, who were really touting Allen as a player last year, that he was kind of thought to be, among recruiting experts, insiders, among the more like ready-to-play type prospects on the Georgia roster. And that's what he seemingly is turning out to be. Sometimes it really is just the way you think it's going to go. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah, Woodland Revivals, thank you. Yeah, so Lowe, on that weird thing that happened with Dart, Lowe did get kind of roughed up on that. That's a really good point. Really good point. Thank you. You're right about that. Let's see what else. Nick Roundtree and Ryan Walker talking about Carson Beck as the Iceman. I like that. Obviously throwing it back to the old Val Kilmer character from Top Gun. You don't mind that, but the idea of the Iceman there as well, because Beck just does not get rattled by anything. He's so calm. His demeanor's, and I think at times Kirby would say, hey, you want sometimes to have the other part of that. But for the most part, in the really tough games, you want a quarterback who's just going to kind of take it easy in all of that. And Beck has very much shown you that he's more than capable of doing that. Kind of turned up the energy a little bit for the Florida game because that was back in his hometown again. But for the most part, kind of keeps that same even keel level of energy. And I love that. Rick Wallace joins us to say, I told you Friday I was going to be loud. Still trying to get my voice back. Rick, I appreciate that. I tell you, all the Georgia fans, it was just awesome. I just love it. I just love that environment so much. And you can tell, and you can always tell before the game how like buzzy it is before the game. You can just always tell, and it was ready. It was ready. That was awesome. That was awesome. All right, let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute. Rome Dog says, I love the last time that he scrambled. Beck did show a little motion. He says, well done. He spied that middle open field several times. Yeah, he's really savvy about that. Really, really savvy about that. And he's a good slider. And he actually had a funny line after the game, too, about how, he basically only got dirty because he slid a couple of times. Other than that, the offensive line kept him so well protected that if it was for him sliding, he wouldn't have been dirty at all, which was a very funny line. Randy Hall says, I faked out the DawgNation.com commenters by going to Facebook first. Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, I hadn't done Facebook in a couple of days because I was just really trying to resist having to give, like, two-factor authentication over to Facebook. These tech companies, and they're just devious. I don't trust them for anything. Oh, my gosh, do I not trust these companies? But I finally just relented and gave it to them because I was never going to be able to talk to the Facebook crowd if I didn't quite sign back in the right way. So there you go. Trippy Charlie says the early betting prices have Georgia as a 5-point favorite in the SEC championship game. That's slightly higher than what I think I had it at last week, but maybe that's what it ends up being. Yeah, maybe that's what it ends up being. I had Georgia more like a field goal against Alabama, but maybe 5 is more right. Randy Hall says he hopes that Humphrey's ready for Saturday. I mean, I think that Julian Humphrey has proven to be a really good football player. I do. Morris Rich says, I saw Kirby Smart giving a teachable moment to Ja'Cory Thomas. He says, my daughter teaches with his mother. That's really cool, Morris. Really cool. Really, really, really fun. And, yeah, Kirby's great with these young defensive backs in particular. DT says, Kamari Laster has held 2 first-round wide receivers to a total of 4 catches for 30 yards the past 2 games. DT, that's a really good shout-out. Yeah, Laster's having a great year. Great year. Richard D says, who would you say was the most improved players or group that led to such a dominant performance? Well, I think the easy answer on that is probably Kendall Milton, right? I mean, Milton was just better than he's been, healthier perhaps than he's been, and he gave you the big performance. So I think it's easy to give him a nod there on that. So let's see if we can be a little bit more complicated or maybe a little bit more, defensive side of the ball. Like who else do you give it to? I do think a guy like Nazir Stackhouse is coming on at really the right time. He had a big sack for you on Saturday. That's a pretty big deal. That stretch there near the end of the first half, the Bullard interception, so monumental because, A, that's just kind of what he's been doing in big games going back to last year. This was obviously a very big game for Georgia. But when you kind of play that sort of middle eight game, especially with an offense like Ole Miss's, you knew you were going to get the ball to start the half. So what you did for Ole Miss and kind of its final possession was going to be a very big deal. That's what the Bullard interception was key. And, of course, the Stackhouse sack there too. Richard D says maybe the entirety of the offensive line, which is also a really good answer, Richard. I think that group probably played its best game on Saturday. I think you're right about that. Against an Ole Miss pass rush that had been pretty good. Let's see what else is going on. B-Max said he had two fans from Jersey here for a party, and they were thoroughly impressed with the way UGA plays. They thought that Georgia could easily handle any team in the Big Ten. Well, B-Mac, that's good to know. Good to know, for sure. Joe Garliardi also shouting out Javon Bullard. Certainly well-deserved for him. Johnny Surf Dog says, I thought the speed of the turf at Mercedes-Benz Stadium favored the Tide the last time, but this year I think it favors the Dogs team. Go Dogs, beat Bama. I like that, Johnny. Appreciate that. All right, let me go to YouTube here for a moment. Over on YouTube to see how folks are checking in over there. All right, let's see. Jonathan Aaron wondering about the red food coloring for Saturday. I'm telling you, y'all going to get me in trouble with that. Foster Moss says C.J. Allen also got some time at the end of last year in that 2022 National Championship Scout Team defense. Yeah, I think that matters. I mean, I remember going back a few years ago, I got a chance to watch some of those high school signees in bowl practice. And they just work them right in there. And it's neat to see. And they just jump right in there from the word go. And I think you learn a lot from that. I think you're right about that. Cody Tony Wilson says, I named my son after Nolan Smith. He ended up being born at 22 weeks at 1 pound 3 ounces. Had to go listen to this, y'all. Had to go through 3 life-threatening surgeries, but he's 6 months old now, and he's home with me and my mom and his mom. My miracle. Cody, that is an amazing, amazing story. First of all, what an answer to prayer that is to have. Just sounds like your Nolan going to be working just as hard as Nolan Smith, fighting and overcoming all the odds. But what an amazing thing that is. What a well-deserved honor for Nolan Smith to have his name spread and shared like that. But really, truly, I know it must have been such a harrowing experience for your family here over the course of these last months. But it sounds like things are going great, which I am incredibly happy to hear. Thank you for sharing that good news. And obviously, we love the name Nolan around here there as well. That's really good. Bobby Means predicts either a Stackhouse or Chaz Chambliss interception on Saturday. Bobby, that's a fun prediction. Paul Toledo says Bama's undefeated Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It'd be nice to end that streak. Yeah, you better believe it would be, and you also better believe you're going to hear a lot about that in the coming weeks. Part of the hype for the game, the fact that Bama's never lost in the Benz, the fact that Georgia's never beaten Alabama in an SEC championship. A lot of chatter like that's going to be a big part of what happens in the weeks to come. Stephen Bozeman, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Cassie Turner wants big domination early up there in Rocky Top. Cassie, we want you to call in the postgame show, too, on Saturday if you get a chance. We didn't hear from you this past week, but hopefully we get a chance to do that there on Saturday, and we'll try to give you that dominant win against Tennessee. Jalen Jackson says, I think it's time we make Damon Wilson our go-to edge rusher opposite Jalen Walker. He just has a look and a skill set that I don't think anyone else has at UGA. I definitely want to see more of him down the stretch, Jalen. I agree with you on that completely. Definitely want to see that, and I think that you could. So I hope that you're right about that. I believe you could be. Paul Moon says our offense is already looking unstoppable. We were humming against Ole Miss. Yeah, I mean, that to me was one of the big takeaways is that, Kirby's always big about, every team's kind of got its own identity. And while Georgia, I think for the most part, is going to try to replicate the identity that it has had of complementary on both sides, and let me sort of say this as a continuation of this. I believe that some of the stuff around the Georgia defense is perhaps a little bit overstated, right? I mean, people make a big deal about this group being far worse than previous Georgia defenses have been the last 2 years. It may be a downgrade compared to what the last 2 years have been, but for the most part, compared to most of the rest of college football, the Georgia defense in 2023 is still stellar. That Georgia still has, a top 10-ish level defense, and that's a really good thing. And being really good on both sides of the ball is still the overall, I think, MO for Georgia in terms of how it's going to pursue this year's national championship. But I do believe one of the things that makes this year's Georgia identity unique compared to the last 2 seasons, for sure, the national championship teams is, I really think, and I'm going to try to see if I can back this up this week, I think that Georgia arguably has the best offense of any of the teams competing for national championships. And I know full well, what, like, say, Washington's been able to do this year. But in totality, the Georgia offense, as Paul mentioned, the Georgia offense that we saw on Saturday, that group, fully operational Ladd McConkey, fully operational Brock Bowers, to go along with the now extra component of the Georgia running game. That offense on Saturday may be as multifaceted and as robust as any of the national championship contenders. That Georgia may be the best offensive team among the national championship contenders, and that might be this team's kind of unique identifying characteristic that sort of separates it from what the last 2 years have been. And as John Stinchcomb correctly pointed out, Mike Bobo deserves the credit for that. John Snook said that could be especially true with Brock Bowers back. Yes, that's absolutely right. G. Gray says, I'll say this, we cannot let Beck eat lunch in the pocket. He says that's going to pick a team apart. Missouri played Beck well. Yeah, G, just to be fair, that's kind of the thing is like that was the one team this year that really kind of got into his face a little bit. And obviously we saw less from Beck that day than any game this year because of the fact that he was pressured a little bit more. And clearly there's a lot of respect here for the Alabama pass rushers, Dallas Turner and, that group. I don't know that collectively they've had a great year. Perhaps you'd say they have, and maybe they have. But I do know that I think that, last couple of years, of all the recruits that have kind of gotten away in recent years, Turner's one of the ones that I wanted to come to Georgia as much as anybody. He's going to have a great career there at Alabama. So clearly Georgia's going to have to show a lot of respect for that Alabama pass rush when you see that matchup take place. Joey Spires asked about Ladd McConkey, who sustained the ankle injury. I do think he's fine. I do. Bobby Mean says the one good thing about Beck, though, is if you bring the blitz, you don't get to him. The Beck is a sort of a master at picking all that apart, and that is true. Yeah, it's simply a matter of, if you come after him, you got to get home. And then for Georgia, the flip side of this is going to be, how Georgia chooses to defend Milroe. And listen, I won't pretend to be the expert on stuff like this, but you kind of wonder, you got 2 outside linebackers in the game, like it's easy to say, oh, you're going to spy with, a Smile Mondon or a CJ Allen or somebody like that. But as Kirby Smart sort of pointed out before, like that's not an easy button when it comes to defense, because let's say it's Smile Mondon who was given the task of, he's going to spy Jalen Milroe. That means that anything else that Mondon would typically do, he's no longer doing that because he's spying the quarterback. That you've got to have, I guess, some version of eyes on a quarterback, and some player has to have the individual responsibility there. But just sort of simply say, you're going to spy your quarterback with, your athletic inside linebacker. That's probably making Georgia less than it needs to be. I think it may be one of those things where, like, you may use outside backers to sort of kind of keep him contained. In other words, the backside guy gets a chance to try to rush. The front side guy, the guy that's in his field of vision, is trying to keep him in the pocket and kind of try to keep him there. But that's going to be one of the tricky things because, I won't pretend that I haven't said that Jalen Milroe is limited. I believe that he still is. But he is very good at throwing deep and very good at running. And so, you got to be very, very careful about both of those things in that particular game. Let's see what else. Alan Hampton says our defense is improving every game, and I believe their best game is yet to come. The Dogs are peaking at the right time. Yeah, I also love what Kendall Milton said this week after the game on Saturday, that because the question was asked to him if Georgia, was peaking at the right time. He said, we haven't even come close to peaking yet. I think it was Milton who said that, so I think that's pretty fun. But, yeah, I know the point you're making there is, well. Foster Moss says you can use the same game plan they had on Jalen Hurts in the first half of the national title in 2017. Yeah, I mean, that 30 minutes, it seemed to really work. You're right. Yeah, perhaps there is some of that that's true. And, I mean, that crop of receivers for Alabama was far better than this crop of receivers is here right now. Kenneth Holt says, I like playing zone against Milroe. It lets the DBs keep an eye on the backfield, and Milroe is prone to misreading defenses and throwing picks. It can confuse him. I don't hate that as an idea. I don't. Thomas Tyson says, if Humphrey is healthy, we could see him move up into the slot against Alabama. Yeah, maybe that's the case. Perhaps that is the case. Spencer Clark says playing quarterback for Georgia under Kirby Smart is something special. You have to wait your turn. I think it says something nice about Carson Beck that he was willing to wait his turn, and he's being rewarded for that right now. I believe you're right. All right. Let's do one more trip around the comment sections, and then we'll wrap it up for today. DT says, I think I've heard Kirby say he's not big on using a spy. Anybody know if that's right or not? Yeah, Smart said that before. Like, there's a really good video, and I used to have this. I don't have it anymore, and I tried to find it one time. It's hard to find. But you know how, like, these coaches will leak these, like, coaching clinic videos? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just one of those things that I'm sure that Kirby would prefer a lot of this stay private. Some coaches just sort of put it out on the internet because they just don't know any better. They think they're being nice, right? And there was one that I watched one time where, like, Smart was talking about this very point, about a running quarterback and how you defend them. And Smart was like basically making fun of media types, and Smart was kind of going into sort of his nerdy voice. Coach, you're going to put a spy on the quarterback, like basically kind of making fun of that, which, is probably worth making fun of as far as I know. But the point is like Smart was talking about, instead of doing a spy, what it is that Georgia prefers to do. And a lot of it was kind of over my head. Like, I'm not a former coach, not a former player, so I don't try to pretend to be something I'm not when it comes to stuff like that. But it was really interesting. It's one of those things where, like, I understood it enough to be really sort of enthralled by it, very interested in it, but I couldn't, like, restate it all back to you. But it was basically some version of, I would sort of describe it almost like a sort of a mirror and match type thing of, hey, if you're the outside edge guy in the field of vision of the quarterback, then you become the spy. And if the field of vision changes and he looks the other way, all of a sudden now you're the rusher and the other guy becomes the spy. It's basically one of those things of the guy that was in the field of vision on the outside edge, that's the guy who has the job of functioning almost like a spy, basically trying to keep him in the pocket and keep him there. And that created an opportunity for the backside guy to pressure the quarterback. Because here's the one thing you can't do. And this is where, like, too much zone, I guess, would potentially be a problem for you, is that Georgia likes to send this pressure in these big games, right? It's like, it's a big game when Georgia's sort of sending pressure. And a lot of that has a tendency to kind of come from up the middle, which you would think theoretically is the worst thing against Milroe, because that sort of bumps him to the outside, and all of a sudden maybe he breaks contain and he's, going for a big run, something that Georgia's had some issues with here this year. So, while Milroe's not the most accomplished thrower in kind of the intermediate area, you probably can't just sort of sit back on him in a situation like that because, and you can't certainly say I've got so much respect for a running quarterback that therefore I'm not blitzing him, because in the best games for Georgia, getting home against the quarterback becomes a really big deal. Randy Hall says, I want Josh Heupel to kick a field goal against us when the Dogs are winning 42-7 and 40 seconds left in the game. Very funny stuff. Rome Dog says, any news on Pop's return? Not sure if he can tackle that injury. So I saw him on Saturday. He was walking around with the the sling on there. And I think Kirby Smart has said that with any kind of like cast situation right now, Jamon Dumas-Johnson would probably not be able to play in a situation like that. So I don't really know what the timeline is, but it's going to be a little bit. Trippy Charlie says, I hope the Vols keep their emotions in check. No cheap shots. Dogs need to put that one away early and play the second and third strings. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing, is that I think overall, while this is kind of not really, I mean, to be eliminated from SEC East contention is obviously a disappointment for Tennessee, I think overall they still feel pretty good about Heupel, and I think the players still really like Heupel, that this is a team, in other words, that's going to treat Saturday like it's Super Bowl. I think the fans will. I think the team will. Like, they are not totally deflated there. This is not a team that's kind of given up on the year, I don't believe. And I do believe that Georgia's going to get Tennessee's best shot. I'm not trying to be a wet blanket. I believe that Georgia's going to obviously win the game. But I think that Saturday's probably a really tough, hard-fought game. I really do. And while I would love to see Georgia get big early and be able to play a lot of backups, the truth is, my guess is this is probably a 60-minute football game. And any kind of concern of, Tennessee is going to be taking cheap shots, things like that. I mean, ultimately, and once again, I'm not trying to be a wet blanket, I think that Tennessee is going to be focused on trying to win the game because, 9/10 of these players are not going to play whatever bowl game Tennessee goes to. This is their bowl game. This is it. They want something to show for their season, and ending Georgia's winning streak would be that thing. I think you get Tennessee's best shot on Saturday. And I think the Vols fans understand that too. Now, some people are saying that the tickets are kind of flooding the market a little bit. There may be some Tennessee fans that don't want to be there because there's, no chance of winning the SEC East. But I still, for the most part, think that you're going to get a raucous crowd there. I think that Tennessee fans also sort of see this too as, well, if you can't do this, you can't do that, at least maybe we can beat Georgia. That I think that's going to be the kind of the vibe thereof. And listen, Georgia's been there before too, right? I mean, you remember Auburn game 2016? This Tennessee team is better than that Georgia team, but that was one of those years where Georgia had nothing to show for the season, but against a top 10 team as a double-digit underdog, Georgia showed up and got a huge win on a Saturday night. It's a big deal. Final time Tennessee will ever play. It's 3:30 on CBS. My guess is they try to make this a little bit of a season salvage moment because I think they know how valuable that win could be. And goodness knows, I mean, you had books being written about last year's Alabama game. What would they do if they beat Georgia this year? Randy also says that Georgia has not had a punt return against it all year. That's pretty interesting, Randy. I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting. All right, what else? Let me go to Facebook again. Kevin Cook says, I think our last two opponents have prepared us to easily beat Tennessee. You could be right in terms of the fact that, Georgia's very used to these sort of offensive-minded coaches. I think you're right about that. And as I said before, I'm not going to try not to be like a wet blanket here. I think that Tennessee's probably slightly underrated on defense a little bit this year. Now, they just gave up 1 million points to Missouri, so maybe this is a bad week to say that. But there you go. Alan Verbanchik says Neyland Stadium is UGA's second home. It certainly has been. Rick Wallace says it was an awesome tribute to Coach Rick Saturday night. It was, man. That plus, his appearance there at the Georgia-Florida game, just some really good stuff here this year. Scotty Barnes says, as he calls him, very funny, says that Tennessee will definitely give Georgia its best shot. I believe that's probably true. He calls them something else, though. Antoine Middleton says, it's good we got to practice with Ole Miss's fast-paced offense. That will get us ready for Tennessee. I think that's right. The other thing that you got to get ready for with Tennessee, too, is I don't believe that Ole Miss quite does this the same way, is Tennessee, the idea of a spread offense, nobody spreads like Tennessee spreads. They put their receivers beyond the numbers, right? I mean, it's like it's the spreadiest spread of all spreads. And so that's another thing to sort of be ready for a little bit. I still think that Georgia wins the game. I just think it's probably a tough game. Let's see what else. Ken Holcomb says if you're going to spy Milroe, you got to do it with Bullard. He says he's fast and he hits like Rocky Marciano's left hook, the Susie Q. Milroe needs to be hit early, hard, and often will win. Yeah, listen, I mean, a guy like Javon Bullard plays a big role in the game no matter what. Craig Jones says that Georgia's been disrespected due to our schedule. We will probably have to win out to make the Final Four. Then they will all find out. Yeah, Craig, I'm fine with that. I do believe there's a certain degree of disrespect that's been out there for Georgia. I think you're about to see that with some of the people. I mean, y'all, it's kind of already started a little bit. It's about to start even more. Alabama's about to be talked up in a huge way. They just are. I mean, you're about to hear so much like goalpost moving on UGA, so much, kind of reconsidering of Georgia. What it's going to come down to is by the time we get to the first Saturday in December, you're going to be made to feel that all Georgia has done the last 2 years is briefly borrow the spotlight from Alabama, and that that Georgia was a fine replacement while Alabama was doing whatever it's been doing the last 2 years, rebuilding, I guess Nick Saban would say. But that in December, Alabama's coming back to take the spotlight and the credit in which they deserve. You're going to hear that a lot the next couple of weeks. Now, I'm going to try not to amplify that too much right now because I do want to take care of business against Tennessee and Tech first. But you're going to be hearing that. And, I mean, I totally believe that while Nolan Smith did make up the whole 7-5 thing, the idea of Georgia disrespected, I totally believe that's a fair narrative. I do believe there is enough evidence to support that. Being universally viewed as inferior to both Alabama and Ohio State last year, the year after a national championship season, was an example of that. There is some, I think, justifiable example of that here this year too. And I believe it's only going to be worse by the time you get to that first Saturday in December. Earl Smith says, we got 2 more games to play before that. Concentrate on Saturday's game against Tennessee, 1-0 this weekend. Earl, those are very wise words. Ryan Walker on the subject of the Georgia running game. It was fun at the end on – oh, gosh, it's late. Yeah, I got to go. It was fun at the end on Saturday. And imagine how much this must be terrible to be an Ole Miss defensive player. It's like you got Roderick Robinson coming in fresh as a daisy. He's just lowering his shoulder. Andrew Paul is in there as well. That was a fun thing to be able to see. All right, on YouTube, really quick, y'all. We got to go after that. Foster Moss says those Tennessee fans are ready to throw that goalpost in the same river that we're invading on Saturday. It's not going to be a cakewalk. Foster, you are right. That's what they're going to want to do. G. Grace says, I'm only worried about the Alabama offensive line. I have no worries but anything other than that on this team. G, one of these days we need to get into this conversation because I really had on paper to begin the year Alabama as like among the very best offensive lines in the nation, and it seems like that hasn't really quite worked out that way. And I honestly don't know why. I mean, you obviously watch your team far more closely than I do. I'd be very curious to know why it hasn't quite worked out because the individual pieces all seem to be really, really stellar. I was really expecting a huge year from Alabama on its offensive line, and it seems like that's not quite been the case. Jonathan Aaron says, why did they say that Dart had a leg or arm injury when he got up? He looked like he didn't even know what a football was. Well, I won't be making any kind of comments on that, but I think that perhaps you answered your own question on that. Sometimes I won't pretend to know in that situation, but if that was the case, that would perhaps not be the first time that's happened. All right, we got to go for now. G says that the game between Georgia and Bama will be won up front as always. That is very true. Paul Moon says, hope we get Humphrey back soon. Everett's been up and down. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that right now Julian Humphrey's probably, rightly earning a little bit more, trust from some Georgia fans. I think that's probably fair. We've got to go. It's crazy late. I've got to turn this thing around here. So thanks for being here, R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. R.S. Andrews is a big part of our DawgNation invasion on Saturday. Can't wait to see Dari and his whole crew as a part of that. That's going to be a great time. And for all of you who are going to be there with us too, we can't wait to see you there as well. And if you can't be there then, hopefully you'll come back and see us tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you then.